Coming up on Front Porch Politics.
I think about 1% of the state population is Jewish.
As the Israel-Hamas war rages on overseas.
And there was a moment which I understood that nobody's coming.
We learn more about North Carolina's small but growing Jewish population.
We pray in Hebrew, that's the ancient language.
But it's also religion seeing a drastic increase in hate.
So I really never imagined a world in which my own children would open up the front door of our home and see leaflets.
Impacting not just Israel, but Jewish North Carolinians.
I have problems sleeping.
Welcome to another edition of Front Porch Politics, the show that brings politics back into our communities. I'm Tim Boyne. You know, after October 7th, when the Israel-Hamas war broke out, there were, of course, international headlines and news. There were vigils and there were protests. But I came to realize that a lot of people don't know about North Carolina's Jewish population and the faith itself. So I called up a rabbi I know, turned it into a fascinating story about his faith, his family, and his desire to see the war firsthand.
During one of the most joyous Jewish celebrations of the year. Indeed, a feeling of joy.
A ton! You've dominated me. My son's defeated me. I love it.
But that light of Hanukkah fighting off darkness.
It's scary.
There are people that are, as we mentioned before, afraid to put their Hanukkah menorah in the window.
The Israel-Hamas war. On a map a world away.
Here to demand ceasefire and get that word out as far as we can.
But it's hitting home in their own backyard.
Can we celebrate when there is this immense suffering?
North Carolina has a small but growing Jewish population.
And we want people to understand that they don't have to take sides when it comes to suffering.
A growing population seeing hate grow as well. An explosion of it since October 7th.
Mommy, I was shot.
I have problems sleeping.
So he's ready for us. This is all going to be edited.
It's early December at Beth Meyer Synagogue in Raleigh.
And also, you can just jump in.
In the midst of a busy holiday season, Rabbi Eric Solomon and Rabbi Jenny Solomon are sitting down to explain Judaism. And right off the bat, it might surprise you. Their first answers don't point to people or text.
There is a oneness of all being that underneath all the fragmentation and brokenness and difference that we see, there is actually a oneness which connects all things. And we call that oneness God.
We pray in Hebrew, that's the ancient language. We read Hebrew.
They also wear head coverings.
It's a thousands-of-year-old tradition and practice that a way of showing reverence before God.
And the big difference between the Jewish and Christian faith?
Well, the obvious one is while we have a reverential relationship to Jesus and see him as a prophet and a person of enormous influence around the world for the good, and he was a Jew, obviously, but that he came once as a kind of a messianic figure, a Messiah, that he's coming again. We're still waiting, is what we say. We're still waiting for the Messiah to come.
I grew up in Charlotte, and my family, we were really involved with the Jewish community.
Phil Brodsky runs the Jewish Federation of Greater Raleigh. While religion pops into minds first most often, being Jewish means much more than that.
How do you describe Judaism? Is it a religion or a ethnicity or a race or a culture? And what we've kind of settled on is that it's a peoplehood.
The religion growing in North Carolina.
I think about 1% of the state population is Jewish, so that would be about 100,000 people, right? And here in Greater Raleigh, which is a big area, we estimate there's about 18 to 20,000 or so Jewish people. That's a nice sounding number, but small relative to the greater population here.
But that's an estimated 247% more than 1980.
It's a big opportunity for us. There are a lot of Jewish communities that are shrinking or staying the same. We're really lucky here in the Triangle where it's a thriving, amazing, innovative, engaging place.
In the political world, it's growing too. Congresswoman Kathy Manning's the first Jewish person ever elected to Congress from North Carolina. She helps lead an anti-Semitism task force.
I believe it is going to get worse. One of the things we know about anti-Semitism is it's more than just hatred of Jews. Anti-Semitism is a shape-shifting conspiracy theory that blames on the Jews whatever the evils of a society are.
Attorney General Josh Stein is also Jewish and running for governor. Rabbi Eric Solomon has seen the growth in his own congregation since moving here 19 years ago.
About 5% of our congregation, if I had to guess, some in the Jewish community here in the Triangle, who are authentic Southern, multi-generational Jews in Raleigh or even other small towns across North Carolina or the area. But the 95% is like us, transplants. I'm from Baltimore, Jenny's originally from Texas. We both came from New York, very classic. From the Northeast, Florida, increasingly California, and other places across the country are transplants that come here. And they fall in love with it for the same reasons we do.
Speaking of falling in love, perhaps you wondered, these two rabbis with the same last name? Yep, they're married.
Yeah, we met in Israel, both young, seeking, post-college. Eric was already several years in rabbinical school. It was my first year, and it was just a moment in our lives when we were both deeply seeking not only a professional path, but even more what kind of Jews we wanted to be in the world.
The instincts of a close husband and wife rabbi team makes them stronger apart and together, especially in times like this.
It's a very lonely profession. There's so much that we hold in terms of people's life experiences, their stories, their pastoral needs, and it would be inappropriate to share, and so we do a lot of holdings.
When we pray together, there are just times that Jenny inspires me because I know, and you know your spouse because of the way they look, or it's an eye, it's emotion, it's a trill in the voice. It's something, and it leads to something even richer in my ability to lead the congregation and me to feel spiritually connected to the power beyond me.
Despite a small Jewish footprint in the Tar Heel state, the Solomons say North Carolina has been welcoming, supportive, and curious about their faith. But a growing problem in recent years, particularly the past few months, has tested that faith.
We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to dig deeper into the issue of anti-Semitism right here in North Carolina, and later, Eric Solomon heads to Israel. Welcome back to Front Porch Politics. I'm Tim Boehm. This month, we are digging deeper into the Jewish faith and the Jewish population here in North Carolina. For this part of the story, we dig a little deeper into the issue of anti-Semitism in North Carolina. And yes, it is happening.
Even before the Israel-Hamas war, a historic problem was percolating again.
So there's been a rise in sentiment, in actions, and in violence. And it is in the back of every Jewish person's mind.
I actually want to go back to the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh, because in some ways that felt like such an extraordinary shift in terms of this place feeling like both a refuge, even more so, and a place of deep vulnerability.
Tree of Life is a synagogue. In 2018, a 46-year-old man killed 11 people and hurt 6, including several Holocaust survivors. It's the deadliest attack of the Jewish community in U.S. history.
No Jewish person has forgotten that. We're still thinking about it.
The Anti-Defamation League reported nearly 3,700 anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. in 2022. It's up 36% from the year before. In 2023, before the attack in Israel, incidents were already up 78% in North Carolina. The Solomons saw it on their own doorstep.
I really never imagined a world in which my own children would open up the front door of our home and see leaflets on our doormat that were clearly anti-Semitic. I never imagined that I'd be on a bike ride a mile from our house and we'd be sort of riding through this little parking area and there would be swastikas spray painted on the parking facility.
And all of that before October 7th.
I found out about what was going on because I got a text from my father-in-law So I woke up to his text. He was telling us he's okay before I saw the news.
When the news broke Hamas attacked Israel, it felt a world away to most of us, but not in the North Carolina Jewish community.
Israel's very far away, but it's very, very close to us here in Raleigh because we're so connected.
The Solomons traveled to Israel this summer, but on October 7th, the Jewish Sabbath day, the news traveled to them slowly.
So it was Shabbat, and on the Jewish Sabbath, we don't, in our family, as many traditional Jews, we don't turn on the television. We don't turn on the radio. We sort of power down.
Shabbat ends with a service. Eric Solomon was finding out and figuring out what to do and say as it unfolded.
I was immediately informed by congregants when they came in. I had not read anything yet, and then immediately I went in. After the service, there's a break in the service. I kind of quickly asked someone to see a phone to see what's going on.
A week later, Solomon's typical sermon was direct and different in tone.
This was a massacre innocent people by a deranged and sick radical Islam. He would not even consider it proper Islam. Radical, disgusting perversion of Islam that is equivalent to what happened on 9/11.
In his synagogue, thousands of miles away from Israel, security was as top of mind as prayers.
We were contacted, either we contacted RPD or they contacted us, one or the other, just to be in touch. There was no specific threats, God forbid. We actually had some bomb threats before October 7th at our synagogue, I'm sad to say.
So on October 9th, we had our first gathering with over 500 people got together. We had clergy from different faith groups. We had elected officials there, and it felt really good in this crisis to have so many people together.
But hate from the outside took a sharp turn in the wrong direction. Since October 7th, the Anti-Defamation League reports the highest rate of incidents nationwide since it started keeping track all the way back in 1979.
I grew up in Israel. I am feeling very scared, very traumatized, very anxious. This is nothing that I remember ever experiencing in my lifetime.
Then protests popped up on college campuses.
Nazis! Nazis! Nazis!
End the occupation!
Protesters hit the pavement too.
We're here to demand ceasefire and get that word out as far as we can.
It's one thing to call for a ceasefire and let's find a peaceful resolution now. That's what we want. That's what the Palestinian people want. We need a peaceful resolution. But there are people that are calling for that and using insightful language to call for a peaceful resolution. Doesn't make sense.
He also can't make sense of this bag of anti-Semitic flyers dropped off at Triangle Homes.
It makes us feel worried.
During our conversation, the room grew silent, his words measured and deliberate, the weight of the moment bearing down on his shoulders.
There are people in Raleigh who had family taken hostage. There are people in Raleigh who lost family members or friends in the violence. Our community is not okay. There's been increased anti-Semitic bullying in our schools. The situation on campus is very hard for Jewish college students right now.
Back at Beth Meyer, a place of worship, a place of comfort, now paying a price to provide that comfort. In Europe, many synagogues have armed guards and require permission to enter. It's not that way in Raleigh, but rabbis fear it's inching toward that.
I hope we never have to get to that level, but we're moved in that direction where basically every single time we gather as a community, we have serious protection. And we practice how to protect ourselves if, God forbid, something did happen. This has become the norm for Jewish life in America today.
We're going to take one last break. When we come back, Rabbi Eric Solomon heads straight toward the war in Israel. Welcome back to another edition of Front Porch Politics. I'm Tim Boehm. This month we're digging deeper into the Jewish faith and the Jewish population here in North Carolina, largely through the eyes of a husband and wife rabbi team here in Raleigh. And late last year, Eric Solomon felt the need to see the war himself, so he headed to Israel.
I am heading to Israel next week on Sunday, and it's going to be a time of challenge. This is a time for challenge for our people.
In mid-November, Rabbi Eric Solomon did something most would avoid. He headed toward war.
Yeah, I was nervous. It was not easy, but it's like this is what rabbis do, is we go to people who are suffering in need, especially members of the family.
Rabbi Solomon saw smoke plumes rising from the Gaza Strip. He experienced rockets in the air intercepted by the Iron Dome.
I mean, we're just jumping with our hands on our head next to a side of the road. People have been killed from these or hurt seriously. So it's surreal.
But beyond the smoke plumes and a barrage of bullet holes, moments of inspiration during hospital visits.
While he was sitting bleeding and shot 2 times as a medic, he told the guys, we had more people injured in that room, and he told the people how to take care of them.
And amid the grief, brief moments of pure joy.
You know, we visit the ill or hurt all the time. I have not visited that often, soldiers in war. It's incredibly sad, it's scary, and it's inspiring. I mean, you feel God in this place.
But just as the smile cracks, he meets the mother of a hostage, bringing the horror back into focus in an instant.
And then I got a phone call from Romy at 10:14, which started with the words, "Mommy, I was shot." And Romy was saying, "Mommy, I'm afraid. I think I'm gonna die."
Not long after, the phone cut off.
There is very likelihood that she's been attacked. Who knows? It is excruciating. I have problems sleeping. This has affected us in the deepest part of our souls.
And tonight, on the first night of Hanukkah,
It's December, back at the Solomon's Raleigh home for the first night of Hanukkah.
because Hanukkah is a time that we think about heroes.
Non-Jewish people probably think of Hanukkah the most when it comes to the faith. But the Solomons explained back at the synagogue, it's not exactly as important as you might think.
It's historically a relatively minor holiday relative to other larger holidays like Passover or the New Year like Rosh Hashanah. Carefully.
So Hanukkah we often think about as the holiday of light, but there's actually nothing about light specifically in the word Hanukkah. Hanukkah means rededication. And so it's a holiday in which we remember back about 2,000 or more years ago when there was a temple that stood in Jerusalem. And that temple was destroyed by the Greek Seleucids. So that was the empire at the time.
But a group of Jews fought back.
And they decided to look for anything that they could find that could possibly be rededicated. And our story is that they found a very small, we call a cruse of oil, a small canister of oil that was pure oil that would have been used by the priests that had the holy stamp and insignia, and it was pure. And they decided to just, on an act of courage and faith, light a single candle. And as our story goes, that single candle not only lasted 1 night, but it lasted 8. And so we remember back to that time. Of course, we light candles as a symbol of that oil that we believe represents the miracle of Hanukkah, but it's really a holiday about rededicating ourselves to our deepest values, to the pursuit of hope and light and freedom.
Lighting the menorah typically happens out in the open, commonly in a window like this. But this year, some feared proudly displaying their faith would instead ignite hate.
There are people that are, as we mentioned before, afraid to put their Hanukkah menorah in the window. What will it be? What will happen? The vast majority are totally accepting, welcoming, and even celebrating. But it's an important moment for standing up and saying no.
And this year, the Solomons are lighting an extra candle to provide light and hope for the hostages. The next week, on the 5th night of Hanukkah, Governor Cooper showed his solidarity with the Jewish community at the Executive Mansion, and the Solomons were there.
North Carolina's diversity is our strength. And that diversity, like a beautifully lit Hanukkah menorah placed in the window, should serve as a beacon of hope for all to see.
As the war rages on overseas, protests continue on our own soil, and we enter a new year, this small but passionate Jewish population has one wish for all of us.
I don't care what your background, Palestinian, Muslim, Jewish, Christian. We want peace and love and understanding. We want a long-standing resolution of this, sadly, this conflict that brings dignity to both peoples. We pray for that and we want that. But we also want to be heard in our suffering. And we want people to understand that they don't have to take sides when it comes to suffering. Everyone's suffering. And in your heart, make enough space for all of it, including the Jewish people in North Carolina. First night of Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah.
Again, a special thanks to the Solomons for letting us spend the first night of Hanukkah with their family. As we always say, it's time to hit the road to find more stories about incredible people here in the great state of North Carolina. We'll catch you next time.